A very good evening and warm welcome to another week of Dan Really Likes Wine with Pick and Pay, another live tasting, and a really interesting evening tonight as we look at not just wine, but wine and food in the context of a really cool food and wine night that is happening on Thursday as some bubbles get paired up with some food and people get to join in online. They'll have the food and wine delivered to them if they're in Cape Town or Johannesburg, and get an expert chef to talk them through some food, and also an expert winemaker to talk them through the wine. The wine will be bubbles, those bubbles will be Pongracz, and the winemaker in question, Andiswa Mapheleba, who will be joining us just a little later on. She's got a couple of the iconic bottles of Pongracz with her, and we'll run through those and look ahead to what promises to be a really fun night out with Pick and Pay on Thursday. But first of all, somebody we had on the show 2 months ago, thereabouts, and we had a great conversation with him talking about his own range of wine. And then last week we had his brother. Now there's a huge debate as to who is older, who is younger, who is better looking, who is brighter. A lot of competition amongst the brothers Raats. Brouwer we spoke to last week because on Wednesday night I'll be hosting Brouwer along with Ian Nordia for the South African Wine Tribe as we look ahead to that Wednesday night with all of our wine drinkers over in the UK, along with Greg Sherwood and Wines of South Africa. And having on Brouwer, we thought, well, we better balance that by heading back to Jasper, because as well as making the wines under his own range, he's the man behind Longridge, and he is with us this evening. Jasper, good to have you back. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Good to be back.
Now, sadly, I'm in Johannesburg because that's not my first choice. I wanted to be down joining you because it's been quite an exciting day for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, it was. We had release of a few of our new ultra premium wines, including the Ostian and the Ecliptica, which I think you have there and will be tasting.
Correct, I do indeed. We've got both of them. I'm really excited to try them both, especially seeing some large stickers with some pretty big numbers from Mr. Atkin sitting on both of them. To pick up on the conversation we had the last time, though, before we start the tasting and the division of the work, we've got the your own range and your own name, and then you've got the Longridge wines. Remind people of the distinction. It's more than just a label. What sets apart the Longridge wines versus the ones that you lend your own name to?
Yeah, so Longridge wine estate, I guess, is that's my main business. I'm a partner in that business with Dutch people, the Van der Laan family. So Longridge is family owned, between them and myself. And the focus with Longridge is Chenin, Chardonnay, Pinotage, Merlot, and Cabernet Sauvignon. That's the main focus of what we do. It is estate wines, so we grow all our own fruit now, and we're doing it organically and biodynamically. As opposed to that, I have a couple of my own wines. It's much more, much smaller volumes. It's single vineyard wines only. And I do what Longridge doesn't do. So, for example, I make a Sauvignon Blanc, I make a Cinsault, a Pinot Noir, and a Sangiovese. So yeah, it's nice. It's I can push the limits a lot more there in terms of being a bit more mavericky in terms of the style. So essentially that's the big difference between the two.
All right, so there's a difference there. There's also, I don't think there's a sense of competition between your wines versus Longridge, but I get the sense there's a little bit of competition between you and Brouwer, because when I spoke to him, he said that he's much younger, he's much more successful, his wine is much better, and yet I seem to have got a slightly different one from you when I spoke to you last.
I'm definitely the prettiest of the two. I mean, no, all jokes aside, I mean, there's a lot of banter and joking and to and fro, and who's the big brother or the biggest brother, and so forth. But I mean, ultimately, we're big mates, and we care, to and throw a lot. I think Brouwer's always a guy that you can learn something from. He's a very, very good marketer as well. He's a good businessman, over and above being, a good winemaker. So I'm actually fortunate that I can sort of tap into his wisdom from time to time, even though we will joke a little bit about the wines and so on.
There are quite a few siblings in the wine industry, or certainly relatives. I think 8% of the winemaking community are Finlaysons of one sort or another in South Africa. But loads of siblings, loads of people related. Is it something that you take advantage of regularly? Do you pick up the phone as you've got a new wine and seek counsel from each other, or chat to each other quite often about the art of winemaking?
You mean winemakers amongst each other, or me and Brouwer?
You and Brouwer.
Oh yes, certainly. When I talked a lot with him, for example, before we launched the Mystery, which is sort of a Pomerol styled wine. Also show each other the wines. Perhaps sometimes before they're actually finished and bottled and so forth. And of course, we have a cousin, Gavin Slubber, who's also involved with Raats family wines and B Vintners. And so it's there's actually a third family member that whose opinion we can also tap into. And Gavin is a very good winemaker in his own right, and sometimes can give his perspective from a slightly younger generation, which is also helpful. We put our heads together from time to time, usually around a fire with one or two corks pulled.
I think that would be an absolutely wonderful fire to be part of. I'm not sure I'd feel the next day, but a night out with the brothers Raats sounds like a very appealing one indeed. Also appealing is the wine that you've made, and let's have a look at the two we're tasting today. The first, I love the understated nature of the name. You've simply called it Oostien. It doesn't sound overly impressive. It's very blue collar. You've just called it Oostien. Then I turned the bottle round and discovered that Tim Atkin's given it 95 points. So it's clearly just not some everyday run-of-the-mill wine. This looks to be particularly special from what I've read up on it. Made from a tiny, tiny little block, not making much of it, and producing what looks like just a wonderful tribute to great South African Chenin Blanc.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I think your reference to the name and what it's called. That's exactly right. I think Chenin, in a way, have been the blue collar grape of white grape of South Africa. I always say, it's probably the white grape of Africa. It suits our climate perfectly, I think South Africa is world renowned now for our Chenins and the quality of our Chenins. But as you know, of old time and still farmers, we still talk about Chenin as steen, and this little block is quite old. It's part of the Heritage Vineyard program, so it's a registered heritage vineyard. I think it has to be over 40 years old or 35 years old, and it's just a very special little block. I can tell you a little bit more about that in a moment, but that's where the name comes from. Oostien literally means old Chenin Blanc.
All right. Well, it's been swirling about alluringly in my glass and demanding to be tried, so I'm going to do exactly that. The one I'm drinking at the moment, I'm not sure what vintage you have with you. I've got some 2016. I think you're now onto your 17 at the moment in terms of some of the release, but whether it is 16 or 17, what makes this particularly appealing to me is that it's had a little bit more time and will no doubt have benefited from that.
Yeah, definitely. Time is a theme right through the story of this wine. Firstly, it took a long time to get to for those roots and those vines to be in that ground, and because they're so old, they bear very, very little fruit. So initially, the idea was to pull that block out because it wasn't economical to farm it anymore. It would only give you, 3 or 4 tons. Was much bigger at the times, and at 60, 70,000 rands a hectare. That makes it very, very, very expensive grapes, and it was just not. Didn't make sense to put that into our estate Chenin Blanc. So there was one of two options. Either we make something really special with it, which can command a higher price, or the vineyard had to go. But I at that stage already saw that this very special juice that's coming out of it, and we then decided to make a separate wine only with those grapes, only with that block. The worst part of the block we left out, and we took that out. There was more vines in a row dead than it was alive, and the top part of the block we kept apart. So that's about, I think, 0.6 hectares, roughly speaking, that is left, and it only gives you 3 tons, 2 to 3 tons, and on a good year.
If I'd said to you right at the very start of your winemaking career, at a time when Chenin Blanc was the kind of wine that was sold almost by the kilogram rather than by the liter, it was certainly nothing polished, that you would one day be nurturing and nourishing 0.6 of a hectare of Chenin Blanc to make a wine of this quality at this price, I suspect you would have thought I'd had a bit too much of that cheap Chenin Blanc to start with.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right. If you certainly, I mean, there were so many good Chenin Blanc blocks to choose from, so many good sites, and it actually goes back a fair bit. I think in '99, I spoke with Brewer and I said, I've found this lovely old block of Chenin that belonged to a friend of mine. Let's make some wine from it. And we were just gonna, make some nice Blanc to, that a couple of friends and family could buy and, give us a bit of pocket money. But the wine turned out really amazing. And that was the start of Raats family wines, with the 2000 vintage being the first one. And I remember at the time I was in the States and I had a few samples with me, and people loved the wine. They said, "What is this?" And I said, "It's Chenin Blanc." They said, "Yes, we'll happy to buy this, but just don't put Chenin Blanc on it. Just don't say what grapes it's made from." And I related this to Brewer, and he said, "Look, we decided that we want to actually show the world that you can make world-class wines from Chenin Blanc, and we don't have to be ashamed of what the grape is. It's a noble variety. They're making fantastic wines in Loire, and we can do the same here. Just because it had a history of being used for everything from, semi-sweet all the way through to brandy, doesn't mean that we can't do it." So we back then, this is 20 years. It was really hard selling it. It was a slightly higher price, and in the States it was like pulling teeth, until the Wine Spectator or someone gave it a fantastic rating, and it suddenly took off. And we sort of haven't looked back. And I left that business and sold off to Brewer in 2008, and he's just taken it higher. And now here with the Longridge Ostian, I think we have a unique style here. We have a very unique wine. There's not many wines that is made in this way or in this style. And yeah, you're right, nurturing a 0.6 hectare old vineyard. And we performed a bit of a miracle this year. I have to tell you that. It was a bit like open heart surgery. There's only one incident that we know of where an old vine, that's almost 40 years old, was taken out of the soil and transplanted in another spot and survived. And we did that at the end of the winter now to fill some of the empty holes. We took some of the vines in one of the rows and dug that whole vine out, moved it over and put it in a hole, and gave it tender loving care. It was in intensive care for many weeks, and so far everything looks like they're going to live. So that was a feat in itself. It's a viticultural story, maybe not about wine, but it illustrates to what lengths we'll go to try to survive each plant that's still alive there.
Well, it's led to a wine that is incredibly alive in the glass, and there's such a richness to this. It feels so indulgent drinking this, and I'm very, very big on indulgence. It is a glorious wine. I can see Tim Atkin gave it 95. I just wonder where he dropped the 5 points, but I'll have to ask him that when I next catch up with him. It really is a glorious wine, and Chenin Blanc just in such a great space. On to the second of the two we've got, and this is the Ecliptica, which I have a bottle of. And this is actually a bit of a miracle because this arrived in my cellar probably 3 months ago, and it is exactly the sort of blend, Jasper, that my wife drinks out the bottle and finishes 3 of before she heads off to work for the day. So the fact that this has survived in my cellar is a minor miracle, and I'm very happy for it. Before we find out what is in the blend, talk us through the name, which sounds faintly Greek, which would be appropriate given my wife is Greek. Ecliptica, where does that come from?
Yeah, then so Ecliptica is actually an Afrikaans word, and it describes a phenomenon when the moon and the stars line up in its orbit around with Earth, when it's orbit around the sun. So I like that name because the whole idea of the stars and the moon works very well in with our biodynamic approach, and the use of the nature's forces in the process of producing the wine, the different grapes being blended. All our other wines are single varietal, so this was the first blend that we did. Remember, I said the focus was with the reds, amongst other things, Cab and Merlot. But we had this fantastic block of Cabernet Franc, and my plan was always to use that in a blend as soon as the time was right. As it turned out, we made dozens and dozens of blends and different parcels put together, and each time, and we taste this blind at the time, my assistant and I, and every time we preferred the blend that had Cabernet Franc as the leading partner in the blend, and then actually most of the time Merlot is the second most grape in the blend, which is a bit rare for Bordeaux blends in South Africa, or I like to call them a Cape Claret. And so I think if the wines from Sant'Emilio, that's much more of a common combination you'll find there, especially places like Cheval Blanc and so forth, that uses high percentages of Cabernet Franc with the Merlot, and then the other varieties play a secondary role in it. And I think with our climate in the Helleberg, which is very cool, very close to the ocean, etc., that blend makes sense for us because we can get Cabernet Franc and Merlot very nicely ripe with the fruit intact, with almost no green characters in it. So that blend sort of chose itself in a blind tasting.
It probably shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that Cabernet Franc is the headline act here, partly because Cabernet Franc is, I think, the most resurgent red grape in South Africa at the moment. It's really standing up on its own, but also because Cabernet Franc leads the charge in the Jasper, which is Brouwer's wine, which he pretends he made in honor of his father, but which you and I both know he really made in honor of the best winemaker he knows.
Yeah, no, that is indeed the case. Very, very little doubt about that. And it is almost the family secrets and then the marketing version. And he's a good marketer, as I pointed out earlier on. So no surprises there. No, but Cabernet Franc, if you look back on our family roots, from my mother's side, it was the Brouwer family, or the Brouwer, as they were called at the time, of the Huguenots coming here in the 1670s. And our first forefather, I think his name was Etienne Brouwer. He came from a town, or closest town was Blois in the Loire Valley. And incidentally, as you know, that's where they grow Cabernet Franc and Chenin Blanc. So with Raats family wines, those two grapes tied in greatly, and I certainly learned a lot about that grape during my time at with Raats family wines. So it was nice to continue with the grape, but for Longridge we decided that we'll use that grape in a blend and not as a single varietal.
As I try some for the very first time, Johan van Eck has joined us. Says, well done, Jasper, one of your army of fans out there. Johan, nice to have you watching. And then Reginald Peckler joins us from Cheetah Plains, as he does so often. Hi, Jasper. Oostien will live long. You will live long. I'm intrigued with your method of keeping this Val de Loire so sentient. 95 points is prestigious. It certainly is. And if you like that Oostien, Reginald, I suspect you might just like this as well. The other half of the Loire, where I suspect that in many of the vineyards in the Loire Valley, there are posters of Brouwer and Jasper Raats up as examples of the type of winemakers they'd like to emulate, Mr. Raats.
I could maybe just mention to Reginald that the 2017 Oostien got 5 stars in the Platter magazine, and that's, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, one of the wines that we launched today. So we're happy to see some consistency there. It was also the runner-up best white from Stellenbosch in the Stellenbosch Wine Review before. So it's good to see that block is consistent. I think with older vineyards, the big up and downs that you sometimes can get pans out, and it becomes a bit like you and I, Dan. Now that we a little bit more mature, we consistently just good, and that's the same with this old block. But coming back to the Ecliptica, I mentioned briefly that the climate sort of helped choose the varieties there, and you must remember that Longridge is only 5 kilometers as the crow flies from the False Bay side. In fact, many places on the farm you can actually see the bay in the distance. And so when it warms up during the day, you get these cool breezes that blows in off the bay and over the vineyards of the Helderberg. And then at nighttime, warm air goes up, cool air goes down. It goes down and it rolls down that mountain and through the vineyards again. So you get a double cooling effect. And you get nice differences also between the day and nighttime temperatures. So this is important for especially for Merlot and Cabernet Franc, that it's a slower sort of ripening time, and you get fantastic good natural acidities in your grapes, and ultimately in your wine. And I think this also makes for wines that will age very well. Stefan Eck there mentioned, thanks. I also hope what you say is true about me, but especially with this, both these wines, we have now got references, going back 7 and 8 years that they've been in the making, and they're still improving in the bottle. And that's also nice to see.
That sort of green herbaceousness of the Cabernet Franc coming through, and just completing what is a fabulous wine, of which only 7,808 bottles are made. I have one of them. Good luck finding the other 7,707. I would highly recommend you doing exactly that. Before we let you go, because I know you've got polo practice to get off to, and there are polo ponies waiting to charge around the field with you elegantly wielding the mallet upon them. A couple of new wines that came out today. Is it the Ciel you launched today? Clos de Ciel? Ciel de Clos?
Yeah, Clos de Ciel. Erika Platter said to me, think about the number plate of Stellenbosch, which is CL. She said, that's how you pronounce it. So I've been following her advice ever since. But yeah, that is our single vineyard Chardonnay. That's also got 5 stars in Platter. And as I said today at the release party, even a greater compliment for me than that 5 stars was about 6 months ago when I showed the wine to Giorgio Della Chia, legendary winemaker, the first man in South Africa to make a Bordeaux blend with the Meerless Rubicon, and also somebody that I greatly admire his opinion. And I was a bit worried about that Clos de Ciel. It was sort of slow out of the blocks and quite shy, and I thought, let me get the opinion. And when he tasted the wine, he sort of sat back, and I thought, oh, here it comes. And he said, Jasper, look at my arms. And he had goosebumps. He said, how few times a wine gives me goosebumps. He said, and this is world class. So, that was meant to me much more actually than the other accolades. But yeah, that's a very, very individual wine, very sort of linear style of wine. I think balance is what comes through there for me, and also very age-worthy. Then the other wine that we also released the new Ecliptica 2017. So we've got just a few cases left of the 16, and we need to start rolling out with the 17 now. That was, I think, one of only 18 wines in the world. We entered the International Organic and Biodynamic Wine Competition, and there's participants from Australia, New Zealand, the USA, all European countries. And that was one of only 18 wines that scored what they call a double gold, but it's a top gold category. So we very, very chuffed about that. I think the 16 that you're drinking now is a brilliant one. I prefer it actually to the 15, which was what was a good vintage, and that also got 5 stars in Platter. But with 16, we had this incredible concentration because it was the beginning of the drought. It was, 15, we thought, wasn't a lot of rain now. And then 16, there was no rain. And generally, there was a big crop. So people that was a bit slow to react couldn't, at the end, really ripen their crops, especially the later ripening stuff like Cabernet Sauvignon and so forth. But if you were vigilant in your suckering and reducing your crop, which is a painful thing for any farmer, to cut those grapes off and they fall on the ground, and there's 3 tons lying there, that's only going to rot away. It's a tough thing to do. But I think if you did that, in 2016 had incredible concentration because there was so little rain and everything else, and the vines were struggling. But it produced really nice concentrated wines. The 17, on the other hand, have already proven itself as a fantastic vintage in general, a much cooler vintage again. So it's wine's probably a bit tighter than the 16. Very, very nice acidity on it. People commented today on that aspect, and that they thought there's many years still ahead of that wine, and I think it's good. I like the fact that the vintages show through in our wines, because what else is the point of putting a vintage on your label then? Unless you're making champagne where you have a house style and you want that to be almost exactly the same from year to year. Part of the whole philosophy of letting nature show through, the French word terroir, but that season, the growing season, must show through in the wine. So if you have a warmer year, you must have a bigger, warmer wine. And if in a cooler year, you have a tighter, bit more nervous wine, maybe takes a bit longer to evolve, but it has bigger or nicer natural acidity. And so I like it that the vintages show through in the wines.
Well, that they do, but don't take my word for it. Don't take Jasper's word for it. Find yourself some wine. I'll pop out to Longridge. I know they'd love to have you along and do a tasting. And if he's not off playing polo or showing his brother brewer how to improve on his wine, you might even get to bump into Jasper yourself.
Dan, I just want to say I'm not going to ride ponies. I'm going to drown a few guys in the pool today. Just water polo.
I have to confess, I hadn't pictured you as a polo player, but water polo does seem a lot more closer to the point. Well, either way, enjoy, Jasper. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time. Congratulations on the new launches. Very sorry I couldn't be with you today, but lovely having you on the show as always, and look forward to another one sometime soon.
Thanks, Dan. All the best.
There we go. Jasper Raats from Longridge and doing his own range of wine. We had that range a couple of months back, but today trying out the Ecliptica and the Ostian. That Ostian in particular is fabulous, fabulous, fabulous wine. And Tim Atkin thought so as well. Okay, so a couple of wines out the way, on to a couple more. Now, just a moment ago, Jasper spoke about the champagne style and keeping it in a particular style. Well, it's all the more important to do when one of your wines is as iconic as the one we are about to try. The label is Pongracz, and Andiswa is the winemaker, making her debut on Dan Really Likes Wine, and long overdue. Andiswa, welcome. Lovely to have you.
Hi, Dan. Thank you for having me.
I have to make a retrospective apology, and we're going back 20 years here when you were probably about 3, and I was early on in my radio career, and I was on air with a guy called Chris Gibbons, who's probably about 103 now, and he asked me on air what the best champagne in the world was, or champagne style of wine, and I gave him some standard French answer. He said, no, there's just been a tasting I've read about, and apparently Pongracz came out on top. And I said, rubbish, there's no way it can possibly be as good as French champagne. Of course, I'd never tasted it at the time, and now I certainly have, and I've had many, many bottles of it. And now know that he was certainly speaking the truth, because it is a a fabulous, fabulous South African wine. And when you get to make now, which is really exciting for you, let's go into Andiswa's wine career. How did a kid from the Eastern Cape find her way into discovering a love of wine and decide that this was the career to take on?
Firstly, I'd like to thank you for the compliment. I am 29, so I was about 8-9 years old when they decided to taste. So I'm originally from the Old Transkei. I was born in Tsolo, moved to East London. During matric, we obviously had to decide what we want to study. I've always been intrigued by science and art, and I've always liked delving into something different, something that no one else around me does. So I heard about winemaking, and I heard that you get to infuse your love for biology and science and something different, and plus I got to move away from home. And then I then enrolled at Stellenbosch University, and then thereafter I did go on to do my master's in sensory consumer research, because I felt like I needed to fine tune my skills more in terms of being more in consumer inclined. So, and now I am at Pongracz. This is my second year. Actually, I did my second anniversary last week Thursday. So it has been such a privilege, and I'm truly honored to be involved with such a great bunch of people, and the team is amazing, and I mean we get to produce some great stuff that's right in front of me.
Congratulations on the 2-year anniversary, and well done. Good that we're celebrating with bubbles. This role that you have now, I'm guessing probably a mixture of both exciting and intimidating, because it's a wonderful opportunity, but it's one of the most established names in South African Cup Classique. And on top of that, following in the footsteps of somebody like Ilunda Basson, you've got some big shoes to fill.
Very big shoes. Very, very big shoes. But, before she moved on to her next company, she did train me. And as short as it was, there were very important things that she taught me about wine production, MCC production. Now we actually call Cup Classique, that we currently use at work, where I'm currently working, and for the brand, and just as a winemaking as a whole.
When you look at the making of Cup Classique or champagne, Jasper referred to a little while ago, if you've got a house style as you do at Pongracz, somebody's opening a bottle needs to know that the bottle they're having now is the same as it was 6 months ago, is the same as it will be in a year's time. I'm guessing it's probably not as simple as you've got a nice big board up in your cellar and add 6 parts of this and 2 parts of that and 1 part of this, and bang, we're all done. How challenging is it to keep getting what people, when they drink it, will immediately recognize as a glass of Pongracz?
I mean, as you know, if it's a non-vintage, you must always try to be consistent in your craft. But what I've seen, especially this year, is that the wine actually grows. You grow with the wine, and then as soon as you start blending, you get to know it from the juice process to the wine, the actual wine. It's completely different. So I think to be consistent in your craft is to make sure that you are always tasting each and every single day, which I did during harvest time. And then it is difficult to live up to consumer expectations, but I mean, that's what we have our wines that we reflect on, that we compare. But the main thing is really to remain consistent and to try to live up to the consumer's expectations.
I'm very impressed by your dedication, Andiswa. To say that you taste the wine every single day, that must be very difficult, having to drink champagne and champagne and champagne and just throw it back every day. Tough work to do.
Yeah, but I mean, that's basically during each and every day during the harvest process, to see the evolution of the wine and what it will turn out to be. Yeah, that's basically that. And then once in a while we get to see the bottles and just see what it has evolved into, to make the right decisions, of course.
I know your mum's had a big role in your life and in your story. I can just imagine proudly telling all of her friends, "What does your daughter do? She drinks cup classique all day, every day." Job.
Yeah, but I mean, she's very modest. She's very, very modest. I mean, I don't come from a wine drinking family. So last year, actually, I brought her a sample to taste, to get to see what I do for work. She was like, "Oh my God, it's a bit too bitter." I mean, like each and every person, wine you need to have an acquired taste. You don't get to love wine. Just, you need to practice and practice and practice. I guess she needs to drink more of it.
Well, practicing exactly what we love to do on Dan Really Likes Wine, and so I'm practicing. I'm going to open my bottle of Pongracz, which I've got not just to taste with you, but also because it links to a dinner on Thursday. While I'm opening this particular wine, tell me a little bit about your trip to France last year and discovering champagne in France.
Firstly, it was my first time in France. I had traveled before into Europe. For the first time, it was quite daunting because obviously the French don't really speak English, number one. But I mean, the group that we went with was very great. It was a group of very accomplished cup classique winemakers from South Africa, obviously, and we basically lived in it was 2 weeks in Epinay, where we went from different wine houses. We went from family-run wine houses to bigger corporations that produce wines, just to see the style in which that they make their wines in. And it was great to see, because that's something that you could actually take back home with and see what else can be fine-tuned in terms of our brand.
It was a trip that I'm sure delivered so much knowledge to you, but it was probably rubbed off on everybody there as they got to learn about somebody coming over from South Africa and what you do here. And that leads to a question from Reginald Peckler, who's watching Apachita Plains in the Sabi Sands. Andiswa, wonder how many questions you get if Pongracz is from France. And he says, your passion for the bubble, it's just indelible. On that question, do you get that often? And then from there, tell us a little bit about the story and about Desiderius Pongracz and his friend Mr. Laszlo, and how we now have the legend that is Pongracz.
Surprisingly, there are a couple of people who know that Pongracz is not from France, which I was also completely surprised by. And secondly, this brand, our baby, is basically named after Desiderius Pongracz, who contributed so much into the cup classique industry by doing research on noble varietals that we use in cup classique production, such as Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And did I mention he is of Hungarian origin? So he was a refugee and who came into the country and basically just started things out for the cup classique world.
Well, he's left a great legend via the wine that his friend Mr. Laszlo named after him. So let's try some. For you, you're the expert, you make this. What are you looking for that says to you, Andiswa, I've nailed it. I've created the very best bottle of Cup Classique that I want to make, that I want to send out under the Pongracz name?
So what I basically look for is, it's a word that's overly used, but it's very important to have your balance in your taste, your mouthfeel, and the intensity of the aroma. So basically, as you can see, this is so amazing to see, because I opened this bottle about 15 minutes ago, but you can still see that bubble, which is also something that we aim for. So when you taste this wine, you get those light aromas. When I initially opened it, now I smelt it, you get those strong biscuity yeast aromas. But if you let it sit, it matures into more fruitier green apple aromas that you get from mainly your Chardonnay, because this is a Pinot Noir driven Chardonnay blend that we have. So 60% Pinot Noir, 40% Chardonnay that we have. So basically for me, aroma, the taste, and the mouthfeel needs to be, and when I say mouthfeel, the bubbles that you get, that you taste on your palate, the mousse that you get, and also the persistence of your bubble, which I also mentioned, is something that's very important when you're tasting through your wine before you release it.
In terms of keeping the seamless progression year from year, do you use wines from different years? Do you hold back some to maybe use for next year to try and keep I suppose, a sense of identity running through the wines?
Yes, that is also done. That is also done just to compare what the previous year looked like, because as Jasper says, your terroir changes based on your year also. So there's certain aspects that we need to also tweak per vintage to make it seem like what the consumer actually likes.
Speaking of what the consumer likes, your mum is really in the early stages of her journey, and I'm sure she'll be getting plenty of teaching from her daughter. If she didn't like the bitterness of this, it probably pushes her into a space we're seeing more and more interest in. And while you come back to me on this, I'm going to try and open the bottle. The first one that you missed, half of it ended up on my shoulder, so I'm going to try and get my technique a little better here. But this is the demi-sec. It is a little bit sweeter, and it seems to be part of a market, especially here in South Africa, that's increasingly getting a lot of interest.
Yes. Actually, I couldn't even get a sample of the demi-sec because it's selling out like hotcakes. Thank you, guys. But this was a wine that was made or produced to kind of sort of cater to the consumers who have a sweeter palate, because when you look at it analytically, it does have almost close to 4 times as much sugar than this baby does, which is more drier. But the acidity and pH are still the same, but you when you taste it, it tastes as if it's less acidic because of the sugar. So this is also a very great wine. We also has the same precision, same procedures that we follow in terms of production, but obviously a different market that we cater to, and then that means different techniques that we tweak towards the end of the process. So yeah, this is something for everyone.
All right, I'm going to give it a go. I generally prefer the drier style, but I'm intrigued to see what you produced here. So this actually reminds me, I definitely, of the two, as I said, do prefer the dry style. That's purely my palate. But I was on safari, must have been earlier this year, and we had an unnamed French brand, so one of those lesser ones. It's not quite as good as the South African brands. And we had this at a birthday celebration. We had it just after sunrise, out in the bush, slightly sweeter, a little burst of sugar to wake you up slightly as you get on the game drive. Worked perfectly. So don't discard it immediately if you are of the persuasion that suggests a drier style, because I think this one certainly does have a space. It also has a space on Thursday night because you're doing something really cool. You and is it Jonathan Molden are hanging out and doing some food and wine on Thursday night?
Yeah. Yes, so we will be tasting these wines along with 4 other courses that we've paired it with. Mind I say also that wine which you're tasting, Dan, is also, it's if you think you're overpowered by the sweetness, try it with something like a sweet Thai chicken or something that will complement it with.
And I love that you brought that up, because we do so much wine tasting and wine pairing. And I sometimes think we get a little bit over obsessed with exactly what food has to go with exactly what wine. But the flip side of that is that we sometimes forget that champagne style wine is equally exciting to pair with food and to have fun with. And you've just made that very point with this little sweet, something that's maybe got either a little bit more sweetness or a little bit more spice. You can have a lot of fun with that pairing.
Yeah, I mean, as they say, taste is all subjective. It's just how you perceive it and what you like it with when it comes to wine. So,
all right. So we won't give away too much, but the process for Thursday night, people can buy tickets. I know if they're members of the Pick and Pay Wine Club, they get a discount. It's normally 550 Rand, comes down to 450 Rand. And with that, am I right, Andiswa, the wine gets delivered to your house as well as the food?
Yes, along with the food. So you'll get a small box, the wine, and also the the process in which you're going to taste the wine with.
All right, and the chef will be teaching us how to make the meals. Is that right?
No, he'll basically just be telling us about the meals. It's going to be very interactive. I haven't tasted the food either, so it's going to be. I'll be just like the consumer as well. Then I'll also explain what I think the wine should be paired with, or how I feel about the pairing. So it's going to be very interactive.
All right. Well, I think we've got a flyer that we can pop up on screen just so you have a look at those details. It'll be Pick and Pay Winemaker's Table. There's some masala cured beef. There's some goat's cheese truffle, some Turkish delight. I think that's going to go delightfully with the Noble Nectar, as well as a duck roulette. And that is all on Thursday night. And if you're a member of the Pick and Pay Wine Club, your usual 550 Rand price comes down to 450 Rand, where you get not just those fabulous dishes, but also 2 great bottles of Pongracz and Andiswa to give you an expert introduction to both of them, as she has done with us this afternoon. I think there's also one other very exciting Pongracz competition running at the moment. There are, if I'm not mistaken, Andiswa, 100 3-litre bottles of Pongracz with your name on, which can be won if you buy any Pongracz at Pick and Pay.
Yes, they are. I believe it has been recently launched, so we're excited for that also.
All right, fantastic. Just before I let you go, the wine journey for Andiswa was still relatively new. You've it's got the career up and running. What sits on the horizon for you? Where would you like to go from here? What are the longer term ambitions for the current Pongracz Guardian? Oh, I think we've lost you there, Andiswa. I think we've somehow lost some sound. There we go. Technology letting us down right at the death, but at least we've got through the majority of it and had the chance to try one of South Africa's most established and frequently awarded Cup Classiques in the form of Pongracz, which will be available as part of that very special evening. If you want to be part of it, you can head down to your Pick and Pay, and they will have the tickets available there in store, or you can get them online and join Andiswa and join Jonathan for a night out of food and wine pairing. And once again, important to let you know that if you're a member of the Pick and Pay Wine Club, which you should be because it's absolutely free of charge, you get 100 Rand off your ticket price. It comes down to just 450 Rand for both bottles of wine, the delivery and the food, as well as an audience with your chef and your winemaker. It looks like we've sadly lost Andiswa, but at least we did have a lengthy run with her, currently making the Pongracz, having a lot of fun with it, and carrying on where Ilunda Basson left off. That does it for today. Big thank you to Andiswa. Big thank you too to Jasper Raats for joining us with a couple of his Longridge wines, their new releases coming out in Stellenbosch a little earlier on today. Reminder, not just the discounted tickets, but also if you are a member of that Pick and Pay Wine Club, it is 6 bottles or more free delivery if you buy online, 3 times the Smart Shopper points, and special deals each month on 10 wines, as well as discounts on a Magnum and a case deal every single month. So lots of good reasons to buy great South African wine and support our fabulous industry. Later on this week, I'll be in conversation with John Smith talking about his wine journey, the 2007 Rugby World Cup winning captain, what he likes to drink, and how much wine he had on that flight back from Paris when they won the Rugby World Cup 13 years ago now. Also on Thursday night, our next live tasting, I'll be catching up with Johan Malan, who is the Diners Club Winemaker of the Year from Simmonsig, and trying some of the Kaapse Vonkel, which won him that particular award. So thank you very much for joining us. Much appreciated. Keep watching, keep supporting, keep drinking South African wine. And if you haven't already, look out. Dan Really Likes Wine. Finally, it is long overdue. Our technical team sorted it out. We are on Instagram at, you guessed it, Dan Really Likes Wine. We'll see you online. Thank you very much for watching. See you again live on Thursday with Simmonsig and our Diners Club Winemaker of the Year. Goodbye.